Good morning, Emile. We're joined by a special guest, Emile Ghessen. He is a conflict documentary filmmaker. He's a past British Royal Marine, and he was on the front lines in Artsakh, covering the war from the Armenian soldiers' perspective. We are so indebted to you for your work, Emile. Welcome to Arach Media. Thank you for joining us. Good morning, fairly early morning for you, UK time, late night for us here in San Francisco. But thank you so much for being here with
You're
us.
welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome to the show. Appreciate you
Cheers,
being
thanks.
here. Yep.
Yeah.
Um, uh, yeah, obviously anyone that's been on Instagram has seen your work, has seen you cover, has seen you talk about everything, has seen other friends of ours that are kind of from the area doing fundraising stuff out there in Armenia. So, if you're on Instagram, you've seen Emile, but we kind of want to dive deeper into your experience and kind of show our audience what went into making this film. What did you witness? And Richard, I'll cue up to you.
Yeah, so the first question is tell us a little bit about your background specifically with the British Royal Marines.
Yeah, so I joined the Royal Marine Commandos at the age of 18 in the year 2000. My father's a Syrian, Christian Syrian. He came to the UK in the 70s. My mother's British. And yeah, I just wanted the life of adventure and then joined the military. And then very quickly, 9/11 happened in 2001. And that changed the way we were going, the British military and American military were going to go to war. And I remember one of my sergeants, I was on the shooting range when 9/11 happened, and he said, we're going to war for this. So everyone's like, yeah, whatever, we're going out drinking tonight, thinking like it's just norm. And then very quickly we'll come jumping out of helicopters in the mountains of Afghanistan, hunting bin Laden, trying to shut down the Taliban and Al-Qaeda training camps. So I've done 3 tours of Afghanistan, the invasion of Iraq, and then we've done support of Libya in 2011. So then I left the military 2012. I've done 12 years and I thought it's time to go. There's only so many wars you could be involved in, knowing that I knew that war was winding down because the public opinion was dropping for the war in Afghanistan. So I left and then went into the private security industry where I was doing bodyguarding work, as well as anti-piracy work against protecting shipping against Somali pirates. And then I just had this crazy idea when I met a guy who was going out to fight with the Kurds in northern Iraq and Syria against Islamic State, Daesh. He was a British sailor. And I just met him and I found out there's a group of them Americans and Brits that were going out to fight as a clandestine mercenary group for free. So I spoke to a few TV companies. I said, who wants to come in and make this documentary? The fact is, got family living in Syria. I've got the skills. I'm a Royal Marine Commander, but I don't want to go fight. But these guys do. Let's make a documentary on it. And they were very keen. And then a couple of days before we're supposed to go, they pulled the plug. This is too dangerous. We don't know what access we're going to get. So I just went on eBay, bought myself a camera, and then booked a flight. And then for 1.5 to 2 years, I was going back and forth to Iraq and Syria, just making my first documentary, Robin Hood Complex, the fight against Islamic State. And then that's really where it started from. And then after my first documentary, I then went to film school for a year, and then made the second documentary, Robin Hood Complex, Europe's Forgotten War, on the war in Ukraine. And then what happened between Azerbaijan and Armenia popped up, and this is where we are now, currently working on my third feature documentary.
That's amazing. Like I could probably ask you 100 questions and not get bored. The first thing that comes to my mind, just to backtrack a little bit, is my father was from Syria also. He was born in Aleppo, as were many Armenians. Once the first genocide, the beginnings of the genocide happened, they ended up in Aleppo, and so I have a particular kinship to the Syrians, and in fact, my father, couple little points. My father's father literally told him, "Don't come back here until there's peace." Thankfully, my father, listened, and he actually went back to Syria and passed away within months before war broke out. So, I'm just grateful he didn't get to see Aleppo leveled. And so, to have you as an eyewitness to many of the things that were there is pretty profound for me. So I just, wanted to say that. So, how did you find out about what was going on in Artsakh and the conflict that was developing, and what led you to go investigate?
Yeah, so obviously COVID was happening, there was a lockdown going on. I was doing work for private companies and filming, like editing work as I do. And then the war started during the news flashes on BBC, for example, Sky News, and it was literally a war going on between Azerbaijan and Armenia. And then I have a bit of a following. People were messaging me and saying, "Oh, are you going out to cover this latest war?" And I was like looking into it, and I thought, looking at the 2016 war that lasted 4 days, I was thinking,
By the
by the
time I
time I
get
pack,
there, yeah.
yeah, is it going to be worth it? Everything I do is totally independent, self-funded, or donations. So to start every project, I always self-fund it until we get the ball rolling, momentum for people to support it, if people do want to support. So I just thought, is it really worth the investment? It's been tough times with COVID. And then I looked into it, and then about a week into the war, and I was watching the mainstream media slowed down on what they were saying, but social media was going wild. And we
Right.
could see the drone footage. The Zeri's PR campaign was massive. And I just thought, this looks really interesting now. It's a different kind of war that I haven't seen before with the drones. So I just bit the bullet, put my hand in my pocket, booked the flight. And then for this project, same as my other projects, is just try to make a contact on the ground, and then from there do breadcrumb following. And for this one, I didn't have anyone on the ground. I didn't know anyone who was there. It was just literally turn up and to see how to go, and trying to get the accreditation, because this war is very different to the war I filmed in Iraq, Syria, and Ukraine. Is that this was conventional forces against conventional forces, and rather than a terrorist organization or separatist. So I had to go down the route of getting accreditation, which eventually I did in the end, and that's how the journey started, really.
Wow, that's amazing. So the other question I would have is a follow up. You know, spending so much time in Iraq and Afghanistan, and seeing ISIS and Daesh, you know, develop, and all the fights that were happening there. We've heard a lot of stories about, you know, fighters being imported. Did you see any of that? Can you tell us anything about the way that shaped up, and how that played a part in this?
Yeah, there's been a lot of evidence. There's a lot of open source evidence, a lot of intelligence reports that Syrian mercenaries that were used in northern Syria in Idlib area were transported to Libya, and then from Libya they were moved across, a lot of them, into Azerbaijan by Turkey. There's a lot of evidence to support this. Prisoners of war were caught by the Armenians that verify this. There's several reports of men that have returned to areas like Idlib that confirm this. Yeah, there was definitely a use. Every soldier I met in a frontline area would always tell me about Arabs. They would go, Arabs, Arabs, and they always explain that they're not Azerbaijanis, they're not Turks. They were Arabs, as in the sense that Syrian mercenaries were used. So there's no doubt in my mind, from the amount of evidence I've physically heard. I haven't physically seen didn't see any bodies, I confirm that. But from everyone I spoke to, it was too consistent to be a lie, that
Right.
everyone was talking about it. And knowing that, like I was saying, there's so much open source information out there that for Azerbaijan and Turkey to deny it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
There were reports that Turkey was flying Syrian mercenaries on Turkish airlines, commercial flights. It's ridiculous. Emile, you mentioned BBC a moment ago. I'm going to throw this, you know, we didn't necessarily script this question, but I'm going to throw it out there. What were your thoughts of BBC's coverage of the war and what was happening, especially knowing what you know now? I'm not sure how it relates to what you knew back then, but from us here, it seemed completely biased. What were your thoughts on their coverage?
The way you've got to look at media companies is every media company is a business. They all run off advertisement and everything else. BBC works very differently in the sense that we all have to pay a license in the UK of around about $200 a year for the BBC. So we all self-funded by the people of the United Kingdom, and also licensing that they sell films and stuff. When it came to reporting, BBC, as a big organization that it is, had a team in Armenia as well as a team in Azerbaijan. However, their reports were very much more leaning towards Azerbaijan rather than actually Armenia. I think this is two things. I think definitely because there's certain lobby groups that probably pressuring them. However, the BBC generally, as news outlet goes, is generally quite impartial. It's probably one of the better ones out there. But what I would also say, the second reason is probably, I think, is because the BBC were given access in Azerbaijan, wherefore they restricted access in Armenia. And Armenia were very much restricting news outlets in. I felt the same. They wouldn't let us get to the front line as easy as we wanted. They didn't let us get the footage we want. They just wanted to show us like bombed buildings and civilians crying. That was really very much during the war. Of course, I'm not saying Azerbaijan is a country that champions freedom of speech. However, what they did is they were organizing media tours for big mainstream companies to control the narrative. And when you think about it as a news company and you've got two sides that, okay, I don't support either side, but one side I'm going to have to go find the breadcrumbs and find my own work and find the stories, or we can go to the other side. We're going to put us on a bus. They're going to take us to where we want, and they're going to give us a story because we want the content. So very much there's two reasons there, I think, with the BBC that their coverage was so much Azerbaijan, because Armenia's biggest enemy for control of the media was the Armenian government and press office. They failed massively. And I spoke to several people since the war who realized, they put their hands up and go, restricting journalists, people like you, was one of our biggest failures because we didn't control the narrative.
Well, I find that interesting because it confirms a lot of what many of us have been thinking. And, you know, you are not an Armenian, so you don't have the same kind of bias that maybe the rest of us could be accused of. So I find that, you know, I find that I don't even know how to process that, but that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
So what Rich is trying to say is that we we are gathering intel as well, right? We in the diaspora have a filter. We're removed from a lot of things, right? There's a lot of things that you definitely understand and seen that we are only trying to kind of deductively understand. And for us, it's a lot of things are just not adding up. That's kind of partially what Richard is
For sure.
is mentioning. And
For sure.
I guess what I wanted to say, so finally you are granted access, because the first time I saw you was through somebody sharing you on Instagram, because we're here in the diaspora doing all we can, rallying, hosting a bunch of rallies, talking to news media outlets, being blocked by a lot of them, by the way, here locally as well, so, you know, CNN and whatever happened with them. So we saw the kind of the onslaught of the media PR arm of the Turkish lobby groups here. But you finally got access, and I started seeing you. I believe the first time I saw you, you were this is kind of sad. There was an elder gentleman, which I think afterwards was confirmed he was killed. He was with you in a car. He stopped by. I think you exchanged some drinks or something. That was the first time I saw you. So finally you got access, right? And you were able to make your way around.
Yeah, that's quite late on, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
And yes, I finally got access in the end, and it was an uphill struggle battling with the Armenians, is because very much I felt throughout the whole war, all they were interested in was Russian media outlets. They were thinking the Russians are our potential saviors here. Let's get Russian journalists to the front lines. Let's get the Russian journalists have the access, and then what we could do is we can get potentially Putin and other people in Russia to get eyes on to see what's going on here. They weren't interested in Brits, Americans, or anyone else. It was very much restricted and that. But yeah, but in the end, it got to the stage where I was just hanging around in Stepanakert, the bombs were dropping, and I was like, yeah, it's all good and well going around and seeing people's houses destroyed, but I need to get to the front line. That's what I do. I'm a former commando. And then another journalist, a British guy, a photographer, was like, you might be able to get to the front line if you speak to such and such. So I was like, I went in there and spoke to them, and I just without being arrogant, I just sat him down and I said, I don't know if you know my background, but my background is I'm an ex-former Armenian commander. I go to water zones. They kept on saying, oh, it's dangerous, it's dangerous. And in the end, I had to say to him, I'm probably the most experienced guy you've got here. And I go, I probably see more action than 99% of your soldiers on the front line currently. Right. I go, let me decide if it's dangerous or not. And in the end, they were like, right, okay. But there's still that very much that fear of, you've got to be a spy. Why else would you be here? Is that Armenian mentality that's very Soviet still into this day, that you're a foreigner, there's no reason for you to be here. Why do you want to tell our story? You've got to be working for a government. So it was very much, it was banging my head against the wall continuously. But then once I got the access, then it was a lot easier.
We were hearing almost conflicting that Azeris were blocking access to journalists. So this is a little bit surprising to me. Rich, Craig, forgive me if it was not to you. A little bit,
No, it makes sense. It makes sense as I'm hearing it, but again, I'd rather, I would definitely listen to the eyewitness of first.
Sure, of course, yeah, of course.
What I'll say then is they
Yeah.
weren't restricting as such like those areas. What people neglect in war and conflict in this day and age, the majority of people that go to war zones to report it are freelancers. Is because mainstream media and big teams cost lots of money. So freelancers like myself who pay out their own pocket generally turn up independent people in these war zones. The Armenians didn't really understand that. They didn't understand that how media works, that they mainstream buys footage of people that are independent this day and age. Not all the time. They will send teams, of course, but not as long as they'd want. So when you have loads of independents that are turning up, the Armenians are like, what's going on here? Who are you? And then slowly they're working it. But they were giving access to people. Like to begin with, they gave me access to Nagorno-Karabakh for, I think, 14 days. That's all they'll give me the visa for, the stamp. So they were allowing them there, but they weren't giving them the access they wanted as such. The Azeris on the other side weren't really allowing independents in. They were only taking mainstream media and they were doing press tours, very controlled press tours. So that's the difference that was going on. People in Azerbaijan didn't get the freedom like I did. I could, in theory, once I crossed the border into Karabakh, I could have gone anywhere I wanted. They weren't like holding my hand as such. I could have gone anywhere, taken the danger, taken the risk as such. But in Azerbaijan, it was very much, you're on this bus at 8 o'clock in the morning. We're going to this location. We will be there. We'll have our soldiers with you. We'll look after you as such. It was very different the way they controlled the media.
Yeah.
So now you're in, right? You got the access. Which areas was your concentration? And you're speaking to people that know the maps, understand the topography very well. Where were you? What was your?
Yeah, so I was based out of Stepanakert because that's where everyone was. That was the only place that really had food. It was under siege, and then from there we went to Agdam, went into towards Martuni. Went down towards Hadrut, but Hadrut was very, very dangerous in the sense that the Armenians were getting pushed back daily. So just moving around all the different areas, trying to get as close as I can to meet soldiers and find out what the story that was going on. And the problem you've got is trying to be in the right place at the right time to get the good footage. It's tough. Unless you're embedded from day one, it was tough. So it was a constant battle for me. It's like, right, I need to get some combat footage. Where can I go to get this footage? So it was a constant issue trying to find footage, especially when you're being restricted by people telling you, don't film that truck, don't film that soldier, don't film this. And it's like, why can't I film this? This truck's on Google. It's just a green army truck. So yeah, it was a bit of a pain, but in the end, we got some good footage. We got some brilliant stuff. But the documentary is about humans. It's about people. It's not about the guns firing. It's not about the bombs dropping. It's about the people. And that's what we're focusing, or that's what I was focusing on the film. And yeah, just watching it back now, we're only 80% of the rough cut done because issues of COVID is slowing us down, because the editors in America, the producers in the States, I'm now back in the UK. We all came together in Armenia a few weeks back to start editing. And so, yeah, we're getting there. We're hoping for a late summer release. I don't want to leave it too late because then people will be like, oh, it's been done now. It's over a year ago. Yeah. So we want to get it less than a year before September, but we need to get it right. The documentary needs to be right. And it needs to tell that story that so many people are expecting it to tell in this. Well, not expecting, but the way that people can get some form of closure. And the Armenians that have actually seen it, or the diasporans that have seen it, have been part of the project, have actually said by watching it, they feel like they've got a little bit of closure, which to me was like, wow. Not because it's the story that they wanted. They've seen behind the scenes, really. They've seen people that have been there on the ground and how they feel, that they realize that their life in LA or San Francisco hasn't been impacted as much as that person there who's burning their home down.
That's right. That's right. Well, I think I can't speak for the other guys, nor can I speak for the rest of the diaspora. But I know for me, and I imagine for many of the rest of us, there's just such even with so much information coming out, there's such a lack of understanding. There's so many questions that we have. When it looked like we were, holding Sushi, instantly it was gone. And all these things began happening in a very peculiar and suspect way. And so many of us have got a lot of questions that continually remain unanswered. So that said, I would offer up, I can only imagine how difficult it must have been to find stories to tell, let alone uh write one, or distill it all down to create the kind of work that you're putting together, based on some of what I'm hearing were the conditions on the ground.
Yeah, and the difference between the work I do, like I keep using the term breadcrumb filming and journalism, is a lot of, if you're making a documentary, people, they know about the story, they know what they want to get, they want to achieve before they go out, they know the narrative as such. The way I do my documentaries is I just turn up. It's investigative. Just turn up and just follow the breadcrumbs to see where it takes me, see who I meet. The best place to meet people is generally in restaurants and bars, because they go, I know a friend that can help you to get to the here, or I know a friend that's got this story. So it's just connecting with people. And so really throughout the whole way of the journey, I didn't really have a story in my mind on how I'm going to tell it. It was only once we got into the post-production phase that I had to sit down, lie on my bed in a dark room and think, how am I going to tell this story? What story arc are we going to tell here to get the story? And even now in the edit, I'm still revisiting it, thinking that story arc doesn't work in that place. How do we connect? How do we segue from the story of the diaspora to the genocide? And how do we segue from that to that character that's going out to see this family that just lost their son? So it's still a constant battle to get it right, and we'll get it right eventually. It just takes time.
No, I believe it. And one other thing I would say is, while I think many Armenians have some justifiable historical reasons for being a little bit like standoffish at first, I think once you get us to open up our mouths, it's hard to get us to shut up.
Oh yeah. I've got a deep love for Armenians, but I've also got a deep hate for you. At the same time, I'll be honest with you, it's because you are an annoying race of people. You mean well and everything else, but you don't know when to shut up.
Emile, how did you go about finding or selecting the people to interview or to cover, to tell these human stories?
Yeah, that's a good question. We filmed so many people. We've got so many interviews, and we're only going to use a percentage of them. And that's the thing. That's the problem with filming. Is if I go to you, David, let's do an interview for the documentary, and then you're really excited. You think I'm going to be in this documentary, and then when it comes to the edit, the cut, you don't make the cut. Right. And people are like, oh, am I not going to be in a documentary? I'm like, I'm really sorry. It's like, well, I'll give you, and it's like, you just have, sometimes you need to film so many people to get the people that you think that will fit for the story, because I filmed so many people that I thought this will be brilliant. It's a brilliant interview. And then when it comes to the edit, it's like, doesn't work with what we want here. If it's a standalone or something different, yeah, it would work, but it doesn't work here. So really, a lot of the soldiers I met that I filmed, they just worked perfectly. Like, we've got the footage of me in Sushi, just on the outskirts of Sushi, the day after the war ended. And I've got all the soldiers just stood there on the side of the road smoking, waiting for the Russian peacekeepers to come. And it's all misty, it's foggy. And they're just like opened up to me. And the two main guys I spoke to both talk perfect English. And they're just on camera, and you can see the anger and the sadness in everyone's faces. And it was just like, it's perfect. I was just in the right place at the right time. So yeah, I don't really have like a formula on who best to film. It's just content. Just keep filming, keep that camera rolling, and then work out at the end what you're going to use.
That's right.
Yeah, we're grateful for your work, Emile, and telling our story. I'm gonna keep repeating that, because our story, our history is not told enough, and it's not known enough. And actually, this is a really great segue that you brought this up, because I have a question that's a follow-up from the virtual event you did last week with the AIER Bastiat Society virtual event, because you mentioned something about the soldiers in Sushi, and how you remember seeing them visually confused and devastated by what happened in Sushi, right? Essentially how I remember you mentioned something like how they thought they were winning. They thought they were winning, and all of a sudden it was called off, and they were told it was called off, and they had to leave. Could you tell us more about what you saw there, and some of the thoughts on why they were feeling that way? Perhaps what could you share with us?
So I spoke to many soldiers that were involved in Sushi, and all of them have all said to me that they weren't losing that battle, they were winning the battle. They were telling me that on the 9th, many of them were told to withdraw from their positions, because what they were going to do is they were going to call in Smerch, Grad, artillery to hit the Azeris very hard, to push them back. That attack never came from the Armenians, so they left their positions and they were like, "Are we going back? Are we going to retake our positions?" And then they just got told early on the 10th that it's over. The war's over. And they're like, "What do you mean it's over? We're winning. We've just left our positions to do another assault before we assault. Why are we pulling back?" And the commanders were like, "This is the orders. Put your weapons down and just go to this point and meet. That's where we all meet and to go home." So yeah, there was a lot of frustration. So when I met the guys, they were confused, they were angry, they were upset. There was so much like emotion in one place. And I was just like, wow. And one thing that I've said it in a few interviews, which sticks with me, is one guy, he was really upset. We weren't filming at the time. I wish we had been filming this, because it was brilliant when he said it. He said, I'm sad that the war's over. He goes, but the only good thing of this, I know my mum can sleep tonight knowing I'm not going to be killed. It was like, wow. That's the reality of it. It's like, yeah, guys, they wanted to keep this territory, but the reality is no one really wants to die. And knowing that, I think survivor guilt for a lot of these soldiers is because they've heard the stories of their fathers and their grandfathers in the 90s war. They heard about the battles for Sushi and how momentous they were. And in their eyes, that they failed their nation by losing it. And they felt frustrated that they didn't lose it because they stood and fought and died there. It was given away. So that's why they felt so frustrated, that a lot of them felt like cowards. One guy was telling me he's ashamed to go home. And of course, the emotions are very raw because the war's just ended. But when you've got young men who are saying they're ashamed to go see their family because his father fought in the 90s, it's like, wow, there's going to be a massive debt. People go on about we've lost a generation of men. Is that Armenia hasn't lost a generation of men at all. It's soon to lose a generation of men, because a lot of men are going to be suffering from post-traumatic stress. There's going to be a massive increase in survivor guilt, suicides, if men aren't treated. So I think mental health is a massive issue here, because so many soldiers are suffering from what they've seen in the war.
Well, if there's one thing I know about the way Armenian men treat themselves and treat each other, it's that they don't talk about this stuff. So they're going to bury it. I mean, I would bet money on it. I mean, I don't think enough is said about Armenian women and about Armenian mothers specifically, about how stoic and how, like, emotional they are. They can be for good reason. But Armenian men typically don't.
Yeah.
They just, I don't think it's part of what, at least there, I don't think it's part of the culture to talk about.
Yeah.
That's a societal norm. I would like to say, or like to think that it is changing slowly. There is much more emphasis on mental health in the country and in Artsakh. But as you said, it's an immense problem. It's a huge problem right now. That needs attention.
Totally.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's a great theme to stay on, and we'll address it more and more as the time progresses. But I just kind of wanted to rewind back and kind of stay focused a little bit on the Sushi and the ending of the conflict. There are certain not evidences, but like hints upon some traitorous moments in the war. Did the ending seem a little bit off to you, as somebody that's seen wars and how they end? Did you feel that it was kind of cut abruptly? And did you feel that kind of, something's off here at any point in your journey towards the end?
I could see very much the difference between the Azeris and the Armenians, in the sense that it's David and Goliath. Seeing young men using AKs that are as old as their grandfathers. And it's like, realistically, as a landlocked country that's got no support from anyone else in the world, how long could Armenia actually physically hold out in this war? And to be honest with you, I don't think the Turks and the Azeris realized that the war would have gone on so long. Yeah. So they were quite shocked that the Armenians held out for 44 days of actual fighting. So I think they probably thought it'd be over in a week. So fair play to the Armenian soldiers for that. But the way it was coming towards the end is social media started getting very busy and very heavy with the Azeris talking about Sushi, with loads of images of soldiers run with flags here, there, and everywhere saying it's taken. I could see that that was a lot of propaganda to begin with. That I can imagine they gave loads of soldiers flags, told them run out there, get pictures quickly so we can upload it. But it was very I knew it was crucial because I knew strategically as a tactician of knowing how to fight wars is that if Sushi goes, Stepanakert goes. It's very simple. If you control part of the Lachen corridor, the route in and out, you control the high ground, is the main cities then gone. So I knew it was crucial. So when it came to the 9th, I was like, this is actually, I actually said to myself, I go, tonight is the crucial night. And then at 3 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call from Arach, who you were talking about a minute ago, saying to me, the war's over, everyone's in Republic Square. So I rushed down there. And there was massive confusions there. Everyone was like, what is going on? We've been told we're winning the war. Now we've told we lost the war. We've signed this over. People didn't really know what was going on. So it was a very emotional times. But then what people don't realize is the government, in all wars, governments feed disinformation. There's 2 reasons they feed disinformation. One is to keep the war effort going, to keep the people supporting the war effort, keep the soldiers' morale up. And 2 is deception of the enemy. So when you're getting told that you're winning a war and then all of a sudden you lose the war and people go, we were lied to. It's like, well, that's war. The war is full of disinformation. War's not just fought on the battlefield, it's fought in the information space. And if you go through history, look at, in fact, I want to write a book on disinformation and propaganda. So I think people to see different conflicts and different wars and how it's used effectively or disaffectively and how it was failed is very much the information war is a very important battle to be fighting as well. So I see why people are very upset that they were told they're winning then for it then to lose. But really, Armenia was never going to win. They could never win that war. It's against the drones. Drones in this war, low scale, cheap drones were what broke the Armenian back. And if it wasn't 100%, if it wasn't for the drones toe to toe, my money would have been on the Armenian soldiers. 1, they knew the ground, and 2, they had the heart to fight. The Azeris didn't seem to have that, but what they did have was the technology.
And this is not so much a question, more like a comment. Again, obviously, you know, having lots of research of the previous war and how things went down. The one difference that we can definitely, as an Armenian nation, understand the difference in this war is that this wasn't us fighting Azeris. It was us fighting Azeris, the Turkish supported militants, and the entire air war, from what we understand and from what we now know, and actually NATO is now corroborating it, the entire air operation at some point towards the end was taken over by the Turkish military command. So essentially that is, you know, it's not a way to kind of a better pill to swallow, but it's more to understanding how the cards were stacked up against the Armenian soldiers.
Yeah.
You know.
That's a good point there. I've got one of the soldiers that's going to be in the documentary. He stood on the side of the road on Sushi, like I was saying at the end on the 10th, sorry, the 11th this is. And he even actually says, this isn't an Azerbaijan war. This is a Turkish war. And then then 2 other soldiers start shouting, Erdogan is Erdogan. Yeah, 100%. And the fact is that Turkey is it's a strong nation. It's the 2nd biggest army in NATO. That went on the 27th of September, this was no accident that this war happened at this time. Everyone knew the world was busy with Trump's election. Everyone knew that COVID pandemic was taking over the media. This was planned. It's very much coming towards the end of fighting season. That's why I think the Turks thought it'd be over very quickly, is because September to October is the end of fighting season, as any country doesn't want to get into a winter war. You want to end it because then you know your enemy hasn't got time to regroup for the winter. So it's very planned to the T. Not only that, is on the 27th of September, the war was probably over in the first 4 hours, in the fact that Turkey had been marking, and Azerbaijan had been marking, recording positions across Karabakh since day one. They knew exactly where the telephone masts were. They knew exactly where military headquarters were, because the espionage system that they must have used of people that are gaining information, reporting back, would have been second to none. That as soon as the strikes happened, boom, 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 they targeted the areas that they needed to target. And the anti-aircraft missile systems, bang, taken out. They knew exactly what they're doing, because like we're saying, we're not talking about a tin pot army. We're talking about Turkey and Azerbaijan, who have been arming themselves for many years, waiting for this moment.
And obviously, thank you. This makes that absolutely completes a bigger picture, and I hope the audience that's watching us can understand what was at stake and how it was performed, and that it wasn't. I often take offense personally when they say, the soldiers did not do well enough. So I actually appreciate what you said, that the Armenian soldiers, the 44 days that they went on. We had nothing to do here. We're here in the Bay Area. That they were able to hold off was a big surprise to the Turks and the Azeris.
Yeah, I done an interview, and I got really annoyed actually with the interviewer when he asked me this. And don't get me wrong, I'm British. I don't have any. I'm not Armenian. There's no reason for me to support the Armenians and that. But what I saw firsthand, and he said to me, he started talking about the soldiers deserting. He goes like, "How shameful was it for the soldiers that you saw that deserted?" And I was like, I'm a former soldier myself, and I go, the reason the majority of these men deserted and left their positions was they had no command and control. They had no leaders there to tell them what to do. And I said, most of these men aren't professional soldiers, they're volunteers. And when they've got drones that are killing 30 men here, there, and everywhere, and you've got no commander there to tell them this is what's going on, this is why we're staying in this area, of course they're going to leave their positions. And he was trying to make out as though the soldiers were cowards. It's like they weren't cowards. Every soldier I saw would happily fight to the death. That's why they were there. But the fact is, they're not going to stand in a place where they're going to get bombed and killed for no reason, especially if there's no leadership there. And I go, that was the failure of this war, was leadership, poor leadership. Don't blame the soldier, the grunt on the ground who was there. They've done their job. It's the leaders in this war that should be held accountable, not the men. So anyone who tries to turn around and say Armenian soldiers are cowards and didn't fight, I'll stand up and say, no, that's not the case at all.
And thank you for saying that. And it's, as a matter of fact, it's just, all we need to do is look at a generation prior of how I don't know if anyone probably in Armenia told you the first time of the taking of Sushi and what was undertaken. We know we're not a nation of deserters. And the leadership was actually lacking because my cousins were serving, and they told me firsthand what they experienced, and they were stationed above in Hadrut. Thank you for saying that. You answered actually my next question, which was, was this more like an ill-prepared army, or was this had something to do with, there was a pattern of the government reforming and firing an entire top brass throughout the 2 years past the revolution? And seems to me the answer is clear. That kind of paid a gross dividends in terms of, once the war started, there was no leadership, clearly.
And I think there's massive, the failures really of the Armenian militaries. One, there's no investment into the military. Two is they heavily relied on the volunteer fighters rather than actual professional soldiers. Three, I think the Armenian military is still very Soviet mentality, that it hasn't moved into a NATO standing, in the sense that they still think main battle tanks are the way to fight wars rather than actual through technology. You'll remember, like we were saying about Turkey's a very advanced military, and is, like I was saying about the wars fought in information space as well as it is on the battlefield, that also comes to electronic warfare. That also comes into intercepting mobile phones and stuff like this, cell phones. When you've got Armenian soldiers that are using walkie-talkies that are being intercepted about their communications, or using their cell phone to speak to their commander, all that information is getting intercepted by the Turks and their Azeris. So very much electronic warfare here failed them as well, because they don't have any secure communications, which is a massive failure. So really, there's so many different reasons, but like I was saying, is the Armenian government has not invested in its military for years. And also you've got Pashinyan, who's talking about, well, he only came to power not that long ago, I haven't had time to implement it and stuff like that. But I totally understand it takes time, but again, they're still behind on their training on how to train up to a NATO standard, rather than actually thinking a very Soviet era still. And that's a massive failure there.
And just a quick follow-up, David. I know
go for it, man. No, go for it.
One question, and it was also from a talk you did on Instagram. Someone asked, and I want to double up and ask as well. There's a lot of people that you've interviewed. Were you ever trying to interview the prime minister? Did you ever reach out to them, or any member of the government? How open were they to such a sit down?
Yeah, so the prime minister, we've tried several times to get in touch with him for doing an interview, and I thought, being a former journalist himself, they'd be quite open. But then I just thought, really, what's happened with the war is that he's gone into damage control. He's battened down the hatches. Why give any interviews out? So apparently he's seen the trailer. I was told that he's seen the trailer for the documentary. So I was like, that was a bit of like a moment. But yeah, it was constantly, we're still evaluating it. He's not giving interviews at the moment. We'll get back to you, kind of thing. The president, I went to the palace, met the president's assistants, and they were talking about potential interview. And then in the end, we decided that having anyone of a position like that might become too political. So the fact is, the documentary is about humans, it's about the people. I then decided, well, I'm not going to get anyone involved. They'll offer me generals and people to speak to in government and stuff. And I was like, I thought, I don't want anyone to have a political agenda in this documentary. So I just totally wrote the idea off and I thought, not interested anymore. It's not required. So yeah, we're not going to include anyone now. But yeah, we were chasing the prime minister for a very long time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
I want to ask you a little bit about Russia's presence there now. I mean, now that the war's over, now that there's a complete shift in the events on the ground, can you tell us about what you saw, if anything, about Russia's involvement? What do you see as their position? And give us a pulse check on Russia's connection with Armenia and how they're going to mediate whatever's going on.
Yeah. So Russia, as we know, is a superpower, and they regional influence in that area. They from post-Soviet days, Russia is the biggest player in that area. They also had the military base in Gyumri, where the Russians have been based. So very much throughout the whole war, is a lot of Armenians were expecting the Russians to come to the assistance of Armenia. That's problematic for many reasons, because geopolitically, you obviously got Turkey that signed allegiance to Azerbaijan very early, were very active in the war. So any involvement from Russia could then lead to direct conflict between Turkey and Russia. And on the international stage of geopolitics, Russia can't be involved in that. There's several reports, lots of reports, first-hand accounts that Russian Spetsnaz soldiers were fighting alongside the Armenians. I've heard that from so many reliable sources. So I do know that there was potentially Russian military advisors helping the Armenians in places, but overtly the Russians couldn't have been seen to help. They were helping towards the end with the anti-aircraft to shoot down drones, but they weren't overtly supporting the Armenians. When the deal was signed, the Russians moved from Gyumri very quickly. So they knew full well that you don't move armor across the country that quick without knowing that it's coming. So the deal would have been in place, the talks of the deal would have been in place since, I would say, the beginning of November time. I then left, I was at Republic Square when it was all kicking off. People didn't know what was going on. It was chaos. I then went back to our hotel, me and the cameraman, we slept for a couple of hours, and then we thought, fuck it, let's drive to Gyumri. Let's get to Gyumri, let's see what's going on. Right. And we drove down there, and we've got the footage of the tanks lined out on the road and them turning on the engine, the smoke coming up. And we're like, are these the first Russians about to move in? So we followed them in our white hire car. There's just my car in and out of all these Russian tanks, over 200 of them. And we follow them all the way in across the border. So we've got some brilliant footage of the Russians moving in. They stopped the night before because they didn't know where the Azeris were. So then we then left them, drove back to Goresh, drove round towards Dadivank, come in from the north, and then came to Stepanakert from the other way. And then we went up to Sushi, where we met the soldiers coming out, and then met the Russians coming in from the other way. So we got all this footage. We're just lucky to be in the right place at the right time, just taking our chances. So the Russians, when they moved in, they didn't really know what was going on. As the soldiers, they were just like, we're the peacekeepers, we're moving in, we're taking over. Very quickly, they then established bases along the Lachin corridor. They then moved down to places like Martuni, Stepanakert. And knowing that is the people from Karabakh were welcoming of the Russians, very welcoming. The Armenian soldiers were very welcome when they saw the Russians of a superior force moving in, because they knew it would stop the fighting. What I would say is that the Russians that I experienced were very nice. They were very helpful to the Armenian people. They respected the Armenian people. Is that there was no negative from the Russians, that their stance is very much, we are the peacekeepers. We are here to stop the fighting. We're not here to try to take over as such. However, what I did see was very much on all the roads, you'll see the Artsakh flag and then the Armenian flag, the other side. Very quickly, that changed the Artsakh and the Russian flag. That the Russians were implementing their visual presence everywhere. Even on the border crossing point is now coloured Russians. The Russian flag is everywhere. So it's very much that if you didn't know and you had arrived there, it looked like Russia controls the area. But I think that's a double-edged weapon. One, in the sense that, yeah, they are controlling the area with influence, but secondly, it's a deterrent to the Azeris.
That's right.
So if they were to attack and it's like a Russian flag somewhere, it's like, you've now attacked us. You haven't attacked Armenia because the Armenian flag's not there, it's the Russian flag.
That's right.
So it's a bit of reassurance for the people to say, we're here and we're here to protect you. So I think it's good. So that's in that sense. But again, a lot of people, I mean, in the Karabakh region they've got more of a loyalty to Russia than they have to Armenia, from what I saw firsthand on the ground.
Interesting.
And then there is a little bit of that duality there, because there's a kind of a, I mean, we don't need to get into it, but it's more like it's kind of like an issue within the household, right? Yerevan and Stepanakert do have a little bit of a kind of like even as a foreigner, you kind of felt that, you know what I mean? Like,
hold on 1 second, doorbell there. Hold on.
No problem. It's morning for Emile, getting his day started. We're grateful.
I appreciate him being so candid and answering the questions so honestly. I think it's
for sure.
We should probably, kind of coming up on the hour mark here.
Yeah, I think definitely.
Sorry.
No, it's okay, Emile.
Emile,
we're so grateful for your time and for joining us this morning, your time, and just being so gracious with answering these questions. And you've shared so much information from your experience. You touched on something about the Russian peacekeepers. You know, as we start to wrap up the interview, maybe just a couple more questions, and we want to give you an opportunity to share some final thoughts on the film as well. But the threat to Armenia's Sunik province right now, yes, the peacekeepers are there. We've heard there could be as many as 10,000 peacekeepers. I'm not sure if that sounds like it's possible based on what you saw, but we're hearing that they need to expand their presence in the south and Sunik, because Turkey and Azerbaijan, under the guise of exercises, have moved artillery and military to the border, the southern Sunik border.
Yeah.
This is the type of thing that happened right before the Artsakh war as well. What are your thoughts from your experience and what you happen to see on what's happening with that and the actual threat that currently exists for Armenia proper now, as Turkey and Azerbaijan have threatened to take the Sunik province by force now?
Yeah, the issue you've got is Nagorno-Karabakh region is a disputed region that's always, well, not always, but is Azerbaijani territory legally on paperwork. Doesn't matter if you agree with that or not. On paper, it's recognized as Azerbaijan. So when they go to war there, they were then fighting for their own territory as such. So when the international community didn't come to help, Armenia goes, well, we can't help you because you're really illegally occupying that land on paper. We might support you, but illegally, you are the bad guys here to a certain degree. So I totally get that. When it comes to Sunik, that is actual Armenia. That's sovereignty territory of Armenia. And if you drive the road from Goris down to Kapan, the road goes in and out of the new border as such. So you're in and out of Azerbaijan, back into Armenia, and you've got big signs saying, welcome to Azerbaijan. And then 2 miles down the road, you're back in Armenia. And then you've got another sign, welcome to Azerbaijan, back in Armenia. It's a really ridiculous border that the Russians, as part of their peace deal, should have dealt with that to say, to stop future problems, we need to secure that this road needs to remain part of Armenia. You've also got the Azeris that are talking about, obviously, they need that road to link up to the other part of their territory. And if they don't have it, they're going to take it by force or as such. I think very much if Azerbaijan attack the Sunik region, that's a sovereignty part of Armenia, that's when the international community can stand by and go, well, no, you've attacked Armenia now. You haven't fought for territory that's on paper yours. You've now attacked a sovereign state, and that's not on. The Russians originally put 2,000 troops in on the 10th of November. On Monday, I know for a fact, is that the roads were closed because the Russians were reinforcing on Monday. So they shut all the roads down. They stopped people crossing the border as they moved in more heavy equipment. So the Russians have been moving more into the Sunik region as a precaution. But the way I see it is Russia is the biggest player and biggest kid in the playground in that area. Yeah? You've now got Azerbaijan that are still controlled by Russia very much. They've still got an influence there. Is that if the Russians can't keep the peace in this small part of the world, how can they keep the peace or have a geopolitical issues elsewhere in the world?
Right.
So it's in the interest of Putin to keep the peace here, because if he doesn't, he loses credibility. When the world goes, well, why are you getting involved in this country, Putin? And he goes, oh, well, you couldn't deal with what was going on in Armenia and Azerbaijan. How can we trust you to implement peace in this region here? So I think very much as the Russians will be with an iron fist saying to them, you're not going to get away with doing that. I think very much the Azeris is playing hardball by pushing up their artillery and moving up their equipment very close. They're trying to scare Armenia. But also you got to bear in mind, everyone knows that there's an election coming up in June in Armenia.
Right.
It's turbulent times. Politically, it's unstable. So really, if they were going to do something, probably now's the time.
That's the thing. Iran has their elections June 18 as well. And Iran has said apparently that their red line was that southern border. And if that southern border is going to go, they might get involved. So like the risks are there. Greg, Rich, if you have anything to add to this,
Yeah, I would,
absolutely.
we're covering it. We're making sure we're constantly talking about Sunik on Arach Media. We feel like not enough people are talking about it.
I would just say from an overview, first of all, I appreciate you breaking all that down. While I wouldn't push back or argue your point about Artsakh being Azeri territory on paper, I just want to bring up that there's a particular irony in the fact that the Russians, who are there keeping the peace now and who are our primary protectorates, are effectively the same people that caused the problem in the first place by making it a disputed territory.
Thank you, Stalin. Thank you, Stalin.
So I think it's you know, because Armenians have been there for thousands of years. It's only been Azerbaijan on paper because of it.
Right.
Coca-Cola.
But you're absolutely right, and I completely agree with you.
Coca-Cola is older than Azerbaijan.
So,
Coca-Cola is older than Azerbaijan. Greg, go ahead, man. Go ahead.
And obviously, as you see, you yourself see this insanity of a road, right? It was the reason why it's that way is because it was in Soviet Union, and they thought, well, who cares? It's all part of the same motherland, but you know, the foresight wasn't there when these countries split apart. What kind of a nightmare it's going to be?
No, but what I'm saying is that in this peace agreement, this trilateral peace agreement, that should have been something that should have been stated, because they knew this will be another problem with the Azeris, who are very aggressive, regional aggressors at the moment. And I think they're getting that sense because they've got the backing of Turkey. That's why they are constantly pushing at the moment.
You think Erdogan's crazy enough to attack Sunni?
I think Erdogan's crazy enough to do anything. He's a guy that is very much a dictator, and he's only ever going to leave power in a box. Is because he's always going to be the leader of Turkey until the day he dies. I very much believe, and I think very much. You remember the Turkish coup that happened and how fake that looked and
It's not.
And then since then he's grown in power in the sense that he's suppressed rights on academics, people at the opposition, journalists. So very much, I think he's possible for anything to do. But has he got bigger things to worry about? Is the Karabakh region now under control of Azerbaijan? Is their main agenda? Has he got anything else? Yeah, they want to link Turkey to Azerbaijan. Right. They want to have a physical road.
Sadly, is part of that 9-step agreement, that road across Sunik to Nakhichevan. But yeah, Greg, you were going to say something, man.
I don't think go through Georgia.
No, it's a humiliating time for Armenia. Back to the human point of the, you know, you see a lot. You deal with people. What's the morale in Armenia like? You've been last, a few weeks ago, you were in Armenia, right? How is the country, in your opinion, currently? What is it? Is it a state of chaos and confusion? Is it mourning? Or you actually foreshadowed it. You said mental health wise, the worst is yet to come, unfortunately. And let's be candid about it.
Yeah, I was in Armenia last week. I got back last week, and I have constant battles on social media with people from the diaspora who really annoy the shit out of me. I'll be honest with you. Is that these people like, why are these people out enjoying themselves? Why are you out having dinner and drinks and stuff? And it's like, the country done their 40 days mourning, they've moved on. And this resilience of people is that when you're in a war zone, where you've lived through a pandemic, you've lived through a recent war, people want to get on with their lives. They don't want to be sat there dressed in black mourning forever. And I know some people from the diaspora who are living in their lovely houses in LA don't really understand that, while they've got their swimming pool there and worrying about what they're going to have for dinner. But what they don't realize is that the average Joe who's in Armenia needs to get on with their life, and that's what they're doing. They're going out, they're dancing, they're singing, which Armenians love to sing, and they're just getting on with their life. And it's like, yeah, why not? Why? And the people are like, yeah, but we still got prisoners of war being held. They go, yeah, we understand that. Everyone knows that, but it doesn't mean that people got to live in like dark times. People got to move on. So the morale, from what I'm seeing when I'm in Armenia, is great. Is things, of course, there's political instability. There's people that are going out in little protests. There might be a big protest here and there, but they're generally not violent. They just go out, do their little thing by the opera or down Republic Square, and then they move on. Is overall, the city is in a really good place. And I've seen it very much different from during the war, just after the war, post-war, and then now. And there's a totally different vibe, especially Yerevan. Totally different vibe now. And I recommend for anyone at the moment to go there. It's very safe. One thing I will say about the Armenian police is, do you mean, fair play to Armenian police? They are like brilliant police force, and the way they do their business in the city is, like we're saying, there was a protest the other day where they were throwing eggs at cars. And it's like, imagine in any other country, they wouldn't be throwing eggs, they'd be throwing bricks. But Armenians, they throw eggs and stuff like that. So he's like, yeah, I think the morale in the city is lifted from what it was. Of course, there's still issues. The biggest bone of contention for everyone is the prisoners of war. But it doesn't mean that people still can't go out and enjoy themselves. So I would say to anyone that's listening to this that wants to condemn anyone in Armenia for going out and having dinner or having a drink, think twice about what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, again, I think that a lot of us felt, and I can't speak for the entire diaspora, but I know that many of us have felt a rise of like, what can I do? How do I participate? And the distance that we are from the action, and the levels of a deterioration of the information once it gets to us, and the fog of our own war, I think has created some of the situations that you're talking about. In other words, people are reacting to the space that they're living in, which is, I'm attached, I'm connected, but I want to participate, but I don't know where you guys are at, and I don't understand in such a direct way what's going on. I
call it diaspora guilt, in the sense that they're so far away from what's going on that they feel guilty that they're not doing enough. And I think diasporans, the way they see to help is by throwing money at something. And we all know about a dad who doesn't really love his kids, but he just throws money at them. It's not that real love as such. So they get that guilt that's there. And I think everyone who I've met from the diaspora that's come over to Armenia since the end of the war, is they all like in shock. They were like, wow, being here is so different now. I'm relaxed. I feel more grounded. I can see what's going on, and now I understand why people going on with their lives. I understand why people want to go back to work and people want to go out for dinner and stuff like that. Is because that, it's like when you're so far away. Just say you've got your girlfriend now and she's out, or your wife's out, and you don't know where she is and what she's up to. You get that like panic, like what's she up to? But then if you go to the bar or to the restaurant and you're sitting there, you go, oh, she just sat there with her friends. It's chilled. I think very much like the diaspora is that way, is that when they go to Armenia, they can relax because they go, it's not as bad as I thought it was, because from thousands of miles away, it looks terrible. And I'm hearing these stories, but being here, I can see it firsthand. And I think very much so is so that the diaspora guilt is kicking in with people. And knowing that as the diasporans, sometimes your worst own enemies, especially with the disinformation, is the sharing of just bullshit online, the memes that everyone just shares, and it just gets everyone panicking, everyone angry, and it can be a bit of an emotional, like, to watch that people just go around in circles. And I think
a lot of social media activism. Wanted to kind of segue and maybe even kind of wrap up with the documentary itself, right? The focal point of what we're trying to talk about here, and also lean into us how we can promote it once it's out. So you're saying that your deadline is probably looking at towards the end of the summer, right? Is that what you're? Yeah.
So the issue I've got is, because I go to war zones, my passport gets flagged, so I can't get the visa waiver to come to the United States. So I need to physically go to an embassy to get to say I'm a journalist. This is why my passport's been to Iraq, Syria. But no embassy is open to process an interview for me to do that. So I can't get to United States at the moment. So, which is a real pain as well, especially when the embassy is open. There's going to be a massive backlog. So I think it's going to be very problematic for me to get to America for such something so simple. So potentially we might have to return to Armenia at the end of May as a team to then complete the edit. Like I said, we're 80% off the rough edit, maybe for 2 weeks, to then bring us into June, to then hopefully send it to the post house in the States to start doing the sound mixing, composing, color grading, ready for best case scenario. By the end of June, we've got complete documentary. Then what we could do is start pushing out for distribution to say who's interested in trying to take this on. And then ready, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, for the middle of July to August to start doing screenings, start doing a premiere, get it screened. This is just a rough timeline. It could change. Is to get it out there, because I don't want it to be going on over a year after September as such. So we want to get it out. The issue you've got is obviously COVID, which is the massive restriction on everything we've got here now. But yeah, we're in a good position, and the documentary is looking great. But like I was saying, there's a lot of pressure on me to get this right, because this has been a GoFundMe project that people are like, well, what have I donated the money for? I don't really like what you've done there. I know you're not going to please everyone. I can't please everyone. And it's a 90-minute documentary. There's only so much I could tell in 90 minutes with such a complex story. So it's just picking the best bits and everything. So we're not going to make everyone happy, but I think the majority of people will be very happy. And it's an emotional watch at times.
So the fight against the Islamic State, Europe's forgotten war, and now 45 days.
45 days, the fight for a nation. The reason why the war was 44 days long, but the 45th day was the 10th of November when the peace agreement was signed. So really, the 45th day was the most crucial day in the turning point of Armenians' history. And that's why we went for 45 days.
Yeah, thank you. That was actually a question I had. Well, thank you for answering that. And Emile, thank you so much for your time and for your generosity with us. You are a friend of the show. You are an honorary Armenian. I'm going to say that. I'm going to go and say that, because we are grateful for you being a voice for our people and for what our soldiers and our people have gone through in this war. It really was and is a fight for our nation that continues to this very day. We are so grateful, and we hope to stay in touch with you and do more work with you ongoing. How can people help contribute towards the film? How can we help share awareness in the film? And any last word you'd like to share about the film before we sign off here tonight?
Yeah, no, just everyone that's supported the project since day one. Really much appreciate. We've got a GoFundMe account that's up on GoFundMe, just 45 days. But main thing for people to support is just share the work that we're posting. And at the moment, content's going to be a bit dry because we're in the editing phase now. But once we start hitting the marketing, we're going to start ramping it up. So yeah, just share, just spread the word. And like this documentary, I don't want this documentary for Armenians. It's not a propaganda documentary for Armenian people. It's a documentary that we were tailoring for the international audience. We want someone to sit down to put this on television, then 90 minutes later go, I actually know something I didn't know 90 minutes ago, and I see why that this war was so important to these people. And that's what we want, because Armenians are going to watch it anyway. You're a captured audience. So this is what we want to tailor it. We want to tailor it for the average Joe who doesn't know anything about this, and then actually a bit of an education for 90 minutes. So really that's what we want. But yeah, I want to thank everyone that has supported so far. And yeah, we'll keep in touch, definitely.
Fantastic. Well, Armenian issues aside, I just want to thank you for doing the work that everyone needs done, and not everybody has the stones to do it. So thanks.
Very much appreciated.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Emile.
All right.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah, good. Yeah, good night, guys. Have a great day, Emile. And
cheers, mate.
We'll see you guys next week.
Okay.
See you later.
Good night.